Cheryl, what are you doing here?
What? What? Oh, wait. Hey, Larry. What are you doing here?
Is it podcast day?
It is podcast day.
Oh, wonderful.
Fancy
Wonderful.
seeing
I
you here
love it.
on Zoom.
Yes, yes.
And speaking of which, Larry, we've never actually met in person yet. Can you believe
No,
that? Wow.
no. And I'm hoping that when I make my trip to California, hopefully at some point this year, maybe that will be able to happen.
Wouldn't
It's
that be
funny you
nice?
said that because it was on my mind to say, I'm hoping it'll happen soon. So crazy, right?
It seems like we're getting to that place. So that's, I'm sure, exciting for everybody. A little light at the end of the tunnel. And I think a good segue in today's topic, right? When we think
Yes.
about what this year has been like for a lot of people.
Yes, and focusing on the mental health aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean for us as individuals and especially for us as leaders, right? I mean, everyone's a leader, any which way, shape, or form, right? The levels of responsibility of your leadership vary and range up, and the impact on other people can be really tremendous, and also lean into impacting bottom lines at companies too,
Yeah,
um, right? So
exactly.
I think it's something that I think in some ways people misunderstand a little bit about mental health and associate it strictly to mental thinking. And sometimes people also throw themselves into particular personality types or a particular type and just kind of chalk it up as that's how they are.
Yeah.
Um, and then when stress levels go, the bad parts of whatever that type is tend to amplify and be worse. And I think people look at it as something that's not changeable or um, having that as owned as part of your identity is not necessarily the reality. So I think there's a lot to the brain and the importance of it, and it's not just about emotions and um, about meditating to keeping it healthy, or as the some people describe it as the brain exercise, I guess you can say. It's a lot more integrated into the rest of the body, and I think that's
Hmm.
something that we should kind of use some time here today to focus on.
Absolutely. And I know you've done a lot of like work, research, study in this space. So I'm excited to talk talk with you about it and pick your brain about it. And as we were kind of briefly chatting before we press record on this session, for me, it definitely has always come from this place when I think about brain health. And I remember doing a presentation probably about a decade ago called Boot Camp for Your Brain. And I was trying to get across the notion of like we spend a lot of time on our physical well-being, a lot of people do, staying physically fit, managing our physical energy and how we show up uh, each and every day to get the sort of most out of our day. What about our brain? And how do we take care of our brain so we can show up in that way, right? Starting off with things like sleep and going from there. And I think it's so critical, especially if you have positional leadership, right? Where you have the decisions you're making can really impact people. And I've always taken a ton of responsibility in those roles, right? When I've had senior roles in organizations with lots of people. And if I'm having a bad day, I can like seriously ruin people's day, and or if I'm not showing up my best, it can really impact individuals, the company, the bottom line, all these things. So I definitely have talked about brain health, mental health, and all these things in the context of leadership as like it's your responsibility to figure out your shit. So you're not inflicting suffering on people. And trust me, I see a lot of people that rise up to the top that have all kinds of demons and seem to enjoy you know exercising those and inflicting pain on people. Um, but also after this year, just seeing it's I think in part because of the way of working has shifted, right? A lot to, where everyone's kind of in slack, right? And I've seen individuals, and no matter what their positional authority is their own sort of pain and suffering, seeping into the workplace in these worlds of Slack and Zoom, et cetera, especially Slack. I think when you're behind, behind a tool like that, it's easy to just kind of tap away and maybe say something that you wouldn't say to a person in person, right? Like one on
Mhm.
one, even on video. And so I think it's important for everyone to be thinking about it, right? Brain health, mental health. A lot of people, so whether whether it's because you just want to be a good, citizen in your company, but also probably want to be maybe enjoying your life a little bit more than you are now, right? Anyway, that's sort of where I'm coming at this conversation from. What about you?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, when if you were to survey a lot of people after this year was over, right? And I mean, we're still dealing with, what's going on still, right? To a degree. Um, I think you get a mixed bag on, you know, people saying like, do you think you're better off now than you were a year ago or not? Or, did you find any silver lining in last year and like all that stuff? And I think that you'd be surprised for those, would think that, oh, yes, last year was the worst year ever. Oh my God, it was this, that, and the other. And I actually think that that's not really necessarily true. I think a lot of people who have focused on a positive mental outlook on things, and you've brought up like, the little things that you do every single day kind of either add to your strength or kind of take away from your strength. I think the people who have focused on the internal work of themselves, they come a lot stronger as a result of what transpired last year, right? Because it's uncontrollable, right? I think they learned to respond to that and decided to make changes or did something they never did before, right? Or decided to stop doing things that they were doing as a result. I can raise my hand and say that that is a true thing for me. I went ahead and got, my brain health professional license through the Amen Clinic as a result, right? I became a check professional as a result. I would have never done that if COVID did
Yeah.
not hit, right? I decided to kind of take things that I was very interested in before and actually just put it to use and see if I can come out on the other side with a legitimate credential as a result of it and see if I stack up in that space. And I did, right?
It's
And
awesome.
I started on the brain because to me, that's where everything starts, right? Like a decision to do or not to do, most people would say, well, they know the moment when they decided to do something, right? And the people who react, right? Well, they need to learn how to be able to respond more, right? So they need more focus on that. So I started at the top
Very cool.
and, you know, worked my way down, and started to realize as I did that, I saw how much the body, your gut health, the physiology of the physiology, physiological aspects of yourself, your spine health, critical, critical to your brain function, right? And so when I focus on my brain, the first thing that I was told to do as a patient of the Amen Clinic, right, in addition to me going and getting, getting that license, was I needed to go have my spine checked out.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting? I needed to go get my gut checked out. What? And it
Yeah.
was like, it wasn't, oh, you have something bad going on here. You need to be put on a stimulant or something. No,
Yeah.
it
Right.
was your other areas. We need to make sure that's right. And so getting my spine fixed, right, which was not a painful thing at all to do, allowed for proper transmission of spinal fluid to my brain, which set me off on a tremendous journey. That helped my gut. I started fixing my gut. Guess what? Having, I was dealing with anxiety. I would deal with stress. Um, I at one time was on Paxil for anti-anxiety medicine a long time ago. I had a nervous breakdown many moons ago. Ever since I had those things done, I now don't need any of the supplementation that the Amen Clinic recommended for those specific particular things for emotional, for stress, all of those things, they
Mm.
all of a sudden they're gone. Why? Because the rest of the function is working, right? And so the day-to-day choices of the foods that you choose to eat, right? The amount of hydration that you have in a day, the time you spend in the physical sun, letting your eyes outside of contact lenses and glasses and your skin in the sun,
Mhm.
all of those things are crucial. And you're kidding yourself if you don't focus on that. And that is one of the biggest learning lessons about mental health is when all that stuff's going on and you're doing bad things and putting bad things into your body or not enough of the good things in your body, you're setting yourself up for failure. And a lot of times people end up defaulting to a quick fix pill,
Yeah.
which might make them feel better in the short term, but the long term effects are going to be bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's side effects and all kinds of things that go along with those pills that I've seen from people, the people in my life who take them are not it's not fun and it's a struggle. There are things I want to ask you about before I get into asking you about them. I want to talk about two things. I'm just pulling up a book so I get the title right. But first off, what I was saying, and this was before we started pressing record, is the way I think about the way I think about my own kind of brain health. It's and we talked about this, right? It's not like you just take a pill or push a button and then you're good, or you go do some therapy and then you're good. It's like every decision I make every day adds up. And so the way I think about it is I every little decision is either adding to this force field, so pain is going to happen, hardship, suffering, chaos, like all of this is going to happen. You can't stop it from happening, but it's how you respond to it, right? And that's where, are you going to suffer or through that or not suffer? So I find that all those little decisions I make either are adding to this what I call my force field. It's like my happiness force field, or my ability to just like let things come in and they don't overwhelm me. They don't kind of take over my day. They don't then get in the way of my making the right next decision, in so on and so forth. So when that moment comes and I'm like, this happened to me last week. I was like, the end of the workday, I'm on the sofa, it's raining out, and I had planned to go on a long run. And I was like, okay, I could sit right here, press go on Netflix, and and I was like, but if I do that, that one decision, that one moment, it's either going to add to my force field or take away. So I got the shoes on and I stepped out and I had a great long run in the rain. It was fun. And then later, after I got home and took a shower and all that, I could watch Netflix. There was plenty of time for Netflix.
Right.
So there's that, and when I think about it that way, it kind of helps me make that right decision in the moment. Like, is this going to help me? And when you're in the space of it's all adding up. Like and doing the things like, um, and oh god, I can't wait to dig into like gut health and spine health and all of that because I'm just getting into that space. But I can feel really great, and I want that feeling, right? So it becomes a bit more self perpetuating once you get yourself out of the pit. Initially, if you're it could be a little tricky if you're not feeling very great, but just knowing that each one of those decisions matter. The other thing is I want to mention because Dr. Amen has a new book out and he's doing the rounds. He's in the podcast and I've been listening to him speak about it and I've been reading his book. And that's Your Brain is Always Listening. And it's a great, I think, primer for people to really start to unpack and understand. He has like a survey online that you can take and find out, what your dragons are. And I did that and I very much, it resonated with me. Yeah, this all sounds really familiar. These are my little fire breathing dragons that are in my brain with the negative, messages and all that I'm working on. So that's exciting and I think very accessible to anyone. And I will put links in the show notes later so folks can check it out. But that aside, I would love to hear more because both the spine health, I know a bit about the gut brain connection because I've been reading about that and I'm sort of treating my own gut right now. But spine health, tell me a little bit more about that because that's sort of new to me. Yeah, and I would love to hear how that contributes.
Sure. So the spine obviously is crucial for, it's the communication engine to your body, right? It's the messenger. It's sending all the messages through your body. And the big one that I knew nothing about, because I had gone to chiropractors before, right? And
Hmm.
I
Me too.
liked what chiropractors were doing, right? And being big into energy sciences, I get it, right? It's like, hey, I'm going in, getting an adjustment of my spine, which is kind of igniting things. It's igniting my spine. It's waking things up. It's stuff that might be stuck, right? And I had a great experience. My son had a doctor diagnose him with the need for tubes in his ears,
Hmm.
and they said because he kept getting sick. So when I went to my chiropractor, he said to me, he goes, "Why haven't you told me about this?" He's like, "Let me tell the doctor, can he give me a month, and then we'll see if he needs to get tubes in his ears." And when I went to the doctor that was going to do the tubes here, it's like, it's the easiest, it's the simplest surgery around, blah blah. I mean, it's still surgery,
Yeah.
right? All this stuff. I said, well, can I have a month and see? I took my son to the chiro. He adjusts him. He hasn't had an issue since,
Wow.
right? And so I went back and I said, he's fine. Check him. No fluid in the ears, no nothing. He got all the fluid out. Everything was good through spinal adjustments, right? He
Wow.
says, no. Now, that's that. That's amazing, right? What I didn't know was that there is a bone at the top of your spine called the atlas, which is a tiny, tiny bone. And there are atlas specialists out there, which are chiropractors by trade, but they specialize in this particular bone. What I didn't know is most people in the world have some type of brain injury that they don't know. You either you play football, you
Hmm.
play soccer, you play lacrosse, field hockey, you bump into people, you hit your head on the ground, skateboarding. Most people have banged their head
Yeah.
more than one time. And that can impact
Mm.
your atlas. And the Amen Clinic immediately after what I told them my history was said, we think you had a brain trauma and you need to go have this looked at. And sure enough, I went and I went to an atlas specialist, and he said, "Oh yeah." He's like, "It's off." We did the X-rays. I was off by 9 centimeters in one direction and 11 centimeters in a different direction.
Mm.
So that meant that my atlas was so bad that like the spinal fluid, it was like it was hitting something and just shooting and like direct.
Ah.
I was not
Yeah.
getting spinal
Huh.
fluid and proper flow to my brain and throughout of my body. It was like just not happening. And this is dating back to probably when I was 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
So you fast forward post 40 now, right? Well, oh my God, right? So I go get this resolved, and all of a sudden, I can run without feeling any neck pain. I used to take Advil all the time. I don't take it anymore, right? And look what that could have been doing to my gut too, right? And making that
Yeah.
work. All of these things, to make a long story short, I was taking some supplement stuff for emotional stuff. After the Atlas, after all this stuff started going on, I was like, let me stop taking the supplements a little bit. Sammy, I was taking some
Yeah.
Sammy and whatnot. I don't need it anymore.
Wow.
I even was given Provigil for ADHD. And in the last 2 weeks, now that I've had much success with the gut, which was my next level, I don't need the Provigil as much anymore. I don't really take it, and I'm hoping I don't need it.
Very
Right.
cool.
So yeah, I mean, the spine is crucial, and being the messenger from the brain down of all the things like, you have cortisol releases, stress hormone, adrenal fatigue, those are all messages coming from the brain down, which causes people to, you know, get diabetes when it's not needed. And that's all stress induced
Hmm.
and bad food and things of
Hmm.
that nature, right? Like your body releases cortisol. Cortisol is good for you. It's supposed to do a
Keep
particular
you
job,
from, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Run away from the lion, right?
right, exactly. But you know what? If your body's constantly in a state of fight flight,
Yeah,
right?
that's not good for you.
Right, exactly. So if we're doing things like
Mm,
not sleeping and giving ourselves repair, we're not breathing properly through our nose and we're breathing for our mouth all the time. We're eating, dead food,
yeah,
right? What are you doing to the insides? You're sending all kinds of crazy messages that's making your body work overdrive, which sending more stuff to your brain,
yeah,
which is what is it doing? It's making you feel like garbage. Your emotions are messed up. And that's all simple things. And I'm a believer in crawl, walk, run. You said something which I found very interesting. You're like, all the little things that I do increase my force field. Well, I believe that everything we should do, we should almost look at it from a crawl, walk, run perspective. You can take a step to wellness by doing one small thing. Every little thing adds up, right? So those little things that you do every single day, deciding not to take a bag of chips, deciding to actually go out for a walk, 5 minutes, doing meditation for 5 minutes, right? All these little
yeah.
things that are pro you add up at the end, and they set you up. And we talked about this in a beginning podcast that we did. Set you up to handle what happened last year,
Exactly,
right? So the
exactly.
ones who built the force field, I like that,
Yeah,
who built this stronghold, willpower force field of positivity and positive energy, it may diminish a little bit, but I actually think now you're using that muscle and now you'll grow your force field even more as you deal with that stress, right?
yeah,
It's deliberate, that we do deliberate discomfort, right? So to grow stronger. But when something flies on us that's unexpected, well, think about how you're going to be when you come out of that at the end of the day,
yeah, yeah.
right?
That's
Sorry, that
awesome.
was a little word vomit.
No, but that was perfect. It wasn't even that long, frankly. And exactly, it was great. And as you were talking, I was remembering, gosh, I hadn't thought about this in so long, but this time that I injured my head in college, and it was just like coming back. Like I think I gave myself a concussion. Um, I need to get this stuff checked out,
Well,
for
that's the thing.
sure.
You don't need a concussion to have a brain injury, right? And
Uh,
as I was going through the protocol, I didn't even write down something in that because I didn't
mm,
remember it. Dr. Amen says it takes 10 times to ask to eventually get it out of you. Like people just don't remember,
yeah.
right? I knew I got hit by a pitch in my head when I was a kid, but I forgot, and it came to me because Dr. Amen said it during my training that I was hit by a full swing baseball bat in the face.
Wow.
I was 9 years old,
Wow.
right? 8, 9 years old, but still, like, I remember I couldn't eat for like 4 days with
Wow.
like, because my jaw hurt so bad. I didn't go to the doctors, didn't do anything. But
Yeah.
can you imagine what that could have done to my spine?
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't. Oh, that's
right?
wild.
And I'm not thinking anything of it.
Yeah.
It's like you're a kid, and my parents probably not thinking like, oh, I should take him to the doctor to get an X-ray or an MRI. Like they're not thinking that.
No, exactly.
If I say 2 and 2 is 4 and whatever, like they're like, oh, okay, you're fine. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I know
yeah,
that
that's a huge
the
thing.
story from college was a funny story. I would tell people like that's all I just sort of dealt with it. And but it was just such I was I went to engineering school, but I minored in sculpture. So I spent a lot of time in like the sculpture lab, and I was making this very large wire framed form that I was going to plaster, and it had this really kind of thick gauge wire sort of coming out of it that I needed to cut off. And they had this thing that snapped thick gauge wire. It was like this big, the piercer part, and then the bars were really huge. So because you really needed a lot of force. So I'm like way back here, and I've got the sculpture in one hand and I've got the bar in the other hand, but it was right over my head,
Oh, geez.
snapped, and the thing just like hit me in the
Oh,
head. Yeah, and it was I was by myself. It was it was whatever. So it was like this funny story I would tell people, and then I was
right.
out of it for 3 days. Of course, never went to the doctor. I was a dummy. Like,
Well,
duh.
yeah, right.
But
And it's
anyway.
not even that. It's not what you're told to go do. Like,
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like Dr. Amen, Dr. Daniel Amen as he was looked like as a quack doctor back in the day when he was talking about getting spec scans and stuff like that. I mean, mental health is a legitimate real thing. But when you
Absolutely.
are diagnosing and people are at an all-time high with mental disorders,
Mm-hmm,
all-time high people in
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
therapy, and there's jokes going around that people are like, well, name me one person who doesn't have a mental disorder.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but guess what? Like, to Dr. Amen's point is I can talk to you about symptom clusters and kind of give it an idea of where you're at, right? And what's going
Yeah.
on and some things that you need to work on potentially. But like, what if you had a brain injury?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And
what?
brain injury or aside, I think, because at some point when you were talking, I was going to pull this thing up, but when you talk about cortisone response, like the fact is that our phones are the source of all kind, like, some people are kind of aware of it. Like as you're on your phone, maybe you're seeing an email from work that's got you a little stressed, and then you look at the news, and then you get this, and then the social media, like you're in this world of ups and downs and like it or not sort of stress response. And if you're spending a lot of time, I think it's the modern human condition, like it or not, is we're bombarded with things that are going to cause some amount of anxiety and some amount of, if untreated, it'll lead into depression and whatnot. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Brain health aside, I think there could definitely be things that are kind of adding to it. And a lot of us likely had experiences that, from sports, like you said, or other ways that are kind of, we're off already. There's a challenge. So I think it's just imperative, for us, regardless, right, to address it, because unaddressed, it just becomes a spiral. And it's all intertwined, right? We talked about that, gut health, brain health, and there's that connection. But if you're not in a good place, you're going to make bad decisions. It's going to affect you physically as well. And if there's one thing I'm learning, especially in the world that I'm in right now, in my full-time gig, you do not want to be old and sick in this country. It is not pleasant. And we have to look out for our physical well-being as well, because you saw it with the pandemic, right? If you had a lot of comorbidities, the impact of COVID was much higher. And I
Yeah.
do think your quality of life as you age is very much affected by your physical well-being. And so it's kind of, especially I think when you're younger, you can get away with a lot more, but um, not so much for us. Um, but yeah, it's really important. I think it's an important thing for people to be thinking about and talking about, like just sort of self-medicating the pain away. You're just setting yourself up for like even more pain and anguish in the future, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I worry about that for people in my life. Uh, I wanted to pivot a little bit in connecting this to leadership, and because it's all kind of coming like this together into this beautiful kind of woven um, tapestry you know, that I'm sensing and starting to kind of weave together. But for my own personal kind of brain health journey is weaving in with the work I do around leadership coaching and whatnot. So one of the modalities that I stumbled into recently around, you know, dealing with like what Dr. Amen talks about, like your dragons, that they often come from traumas, maybe big little T traumas, that you suffered when you were young. And there are a lot of different modalities you can use to kind of process those traumas. And he talks about in his book a lot the EMDR therapy, which is like this using eye movement to kind of, you know, uh, process the trauma and whatnot.
Yep.
The thing I stumbled into was IFS, and that was through Tim Ferriss's podcast. And he interviewed the kind of founder of IFS, Dr. Richard Schwartz. But what I love is like Dr. Schwartz talks about the 8 C's of self leadership. And when I read them, I'm like, yeah, well, this is how I want to be day in, day out. And this is how I want leaders to be day in, day out. Well, really, all of us, right? Shouldn't we all? But
Yep.
especially if you're a leader and you're influencing others in the workplace. So I've been spending more time sort of digging into the 8 C's and thinking about it. And that is clarity, compassion, courage, confidence, curiosity, creativity, calmness, and connectedness. When I think about all of those together, it's like, yeah, ooh, wouldn't that just to be in that state, right? Not only when you're just in a in the comfort of your home and in a safe space, but in the face of stress, in the face of whatever challenge life throws your way, to be able to stay calm and courageous. And I've been unpacking each of these things for myself and remembering things that happened when I was young. Like I remembered because I often I have this rub around curiosity in particular, a little anxiety around curiosity. So initially, when I don't know something, I'm going to be I'm anxious about it, and I'm like almost don't want to know. So I tend to not be. I used to, especially, although this is starting to shift. The first one to like dig into a new thing, like a new tech or a new app that people are doing, or it takes a while for me to like start to want to learn about something. I the way I would describe it is like I need to hear about it 10 times before I'm going to be like, okay, maybe I'll pay attention to this. But I had real anxiety around curiosity and not knowing. And then I remembered this story. And this was like in a work meeting, it came to me where when I was little, we were in the car driving down the highway. My mom's driving. This is like the 70s. So no seatbelts. You know, I'm sitting in the front seat. My brother is like in the back seat and he's holding on to my seat. He's standing up and he's like holding on to the back of my seat and the window's open and the hair, the wind is blowing through his hair. But I'm sitting there and I was curious if the door was locked, could I open the door from the inside? And so I decided to open the door while we were flying down the highway, while my brother was hanging right there. So my brother almost fell out of the car. My mom like panicked, like, pulled off to the side of the road. I was in trouble. I felt awful. And it was just like, whoa, okay. Yeah, I could see why maybe I might be like a little anxious about being curious, having had that experience.
Right.
So anyway, it's like it's just fascinating that when you start to whether you're looking at the dragons that Dr. Amen talks about, looking at the 8 C's, and you start to kind of unpack like where are these rubs for you as a person, and then there's so many modalities. Like I think a lot of people immediately go to either drugs or talk therapy. That those are there's like hundreds of kinds of therapy that you can do, and IFS is one, and that and by no means am I would never recommend anything specifically to anyone. Everyone needs to see what resonates with them, but it's been really great for me. It's really helping to unlock and kind of like process some of this and like let it go in some ways or care for it in a way that is making it less of a feature in my life and in my my kind of mental state and getting in the way of my being able to show up in this the way I want to show up day in day out. Anyway, that's kind of another element of this, and where I'm at when I think about brain health. Uh, there's the physical aspects of it, and then there's this other. There are the kind of I don't want to say mental because it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think this that your sort of inner world, right? Our inner worlds are so kind of rich. It's not just like our thinking
A lot
brain,
going
right?
on.
There's a lot going
Lot
on.
going on. Yeah. Um, you know, life is a journey. We are fluid beings. We're evolving and growing and taking things in and releasing things all the time, right? I like to say that we develop tendencies over time, right? So your tendency to be a little more timid in your curiosities. Um, I think it's all about awareness, right?
Yeah.
At the forefront, right? Because now if you're aware of your tendencies, good, bad, and different, right? Um, you can make better decisions, you can respond. And then you can also work on the ones that you're not necessarily proud of,
Yeah.
right? Like in that scenario, like if you're aware that you aren't as comfortable being curious, you can put yourself in a safe place to be more curious, to develop that, you know, that muscle, I guess
Yeah.
you could say, right?
Yeah.
And evolve
Yeah.
with it, right?
Exactly.
Everything all revolves around fear in some way, shape, or form. But tying back to the point of the initial conversation, it's like people are not running on a full tank of gas to begin with. The stuff that they do to their bodies and the things that they do are taking that gas tank down even
Yeah.
further. So you're not operating at an optimal situation, right?
No.
So odds are your decision making is going to get worse.
Yeah.
Pandemic hits, your decision making is going to get worse, right? I hear people talk all the time how much they've increased their alcohol consumption and all these other things over the course of this time, right? Or people are I don't give a you know what responses that people will put into electronic communication that maybe they might not have done in the past,
Yeah.
right? Because they're frustrated or they just don't have the willpower, or it's like, I don't care. It's
Yeah.
like they start to get to those places, right? So I think what's important is those decisions will impact you,
Hmm.
right? But there's always a choice, right? So having a moment of awareness and saying, you know what, I don't feel light, I don't feel energized, I don't feel good, I don't feel good emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, right? Well, you can take small steps and it doesn't cost you. You don't need to go to some doctor. You don't need a pill,
Yeah.
right? Uh, right. You don't to be able to take a path back to wellness,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
put yourself in a good position, because if you're stressed and then you're put in a stressful situation, you're not your best self.
No.
Right? And so for
Exactly.
leaders who are in these positions, right, they need to pay attention holistically to the people that they lead,
Hmm.
right? They need to understand that their leadership is not focused in on what the job description is. The best leaders in the world, the people that will have individuals who will run through walls for them, are the ones that go past the description of why they're there.
Hmm.
They're the ones that care about a person's mental health. They care about the person. They'll go up to them and be like, you need to go home. You need to stop working. You need to take a
Yeah.
break. You know, like the ones who help people work through their tendencies that are not serving
Yeah.
them have major impacts on their lives, right? And that's what leaders need to do. You lead by your own example, but you need to understand that people are going to have deficiencies, and a good leader knows their people's deficiencies and help work through them and also put them in good positions. But if you're
Yeah.
not, as a leader, focusing on telling people that they should be sleeping properly
Hmm.
and drinking enough water, you know, getting out in the sun, doing all these things, you're doing a disservice,
Yeah.
because people may say that's my own business. Well, you can nonchalantly add it into your everyday. You do it yourself. You do all these things, and people will start to be more vibrant. They'll feel better. It'll just have kind of that ripple effect that doesn't need some kind of big bang approach,
Yeah.
right? To it all.
Very cool.
So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I wanted to connect to back to something you said earlier in today was which around identity. And because some these tendencies can get calcified into these notions of this is just the way it is and the way I am. Um, and and if a lot of us believe in the growth mindset, right? And we believe in the growth mindset maybe in certain ways, but maybe not when we think about the way we are, and I think that's the other thing I'm waking up to. And well, it's funny because when I started working with this IFS therapist, I said there's some behaviors of mine I find particularly vexing because there's so much, I've been on a journey and I continue to evolve and such a believer in growth mindset, but there are these specific things that are I've tried many 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 things, and it's like vexing was the only way I could describe it because no matter what I've tried, it wasn't budging. It wasn't budging. Um, and so it can start to, you can get to a place like I was getting to a place was, I guess that's just the way it is, just the way I am. Um, and when you're on that journey, it's, think of it as a journey and we're all in a different place, but what's that next level? And I feel like I've tapped into that next level and things are really starting to shift for me in a way that I truly didn't believe was possible because I've been at this for a long while, and I was like,
Right.
I've tried everything. But there's always something new to try, as we've seen. So it's fascinating. It's such a cool, fascinating world when you start paying attention to this. And yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving
Most
it right now.
people, when they get to that position of what sounds to me like you're almost in a position of trying to force things to happen, um, the universe has a natural way of kind of slapping you in the head and saying you're not going anywhere until you take a chill. Right. And I have learned that lesson this year because I being having a growth mindset, being optimistic, being disciplined, being a an achiever.
Hmm.
Um, I always was go, 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 go. And so what I ended up struggling with is how do you stop and smell the roses? How can you sit in a place of relaxation and watch the Netflix and know in that moment, like you said earlier today, was it the right choice to go for the run? Or was it myself telling me that I needed a time? And I'm not posing judgment that you made the right decision or not. Each person their own. But for my own personal journey, is I knew that when it came down to it, I would always force myself to do more. And I
Mm,
know now that that impacts me in a more negative way than positive, right?
yeah.
I think when you decide to let go, and I think people think let go, it's like, oh, I'm just going to let go. I'm just going to not do anything, not care. No, no, no. That's not the point.
Yeah.
It's not force, right? Letting
Yeah.
go means you're not going to force. You're going to go with the flow. Letting go is allowing yourself to go with the flow of the situation at hand. Take it as it comes, learn what it is, make proper responses from whatever is posed in front of you. And when you realize that you don't get agitated and try to force things, things always work out in the end. And I have countless in the last 3 months where things that I know in the past would have made me go nuts. I would have been screaming and yelling. I would have been trying to force things. I would have tried to make things work. And I didn't. I was very, very calm. I kind of just like, all right, well, it's gonna happen. This will happen when things are gonna happen. I can't
Hmm.
force this. And when I let it go, it ended up being a better outcome than what I was
Yeah.
wanting in the first place.
Yeah.
And that was a great learning lesson. And that's
Yeah.
teaching me now to take a pause, to know when it is to right to be able to sit and relax. Because I don't want to be that person. I've been that person in the past where I've gone on vacation and I'd go look at work or or you're looking at something that's in a phone instead of looking at the beautiful sights that are there or looking at your child.
Hmm.
you know I would always be so regimented. Last week I did this as a great example. My daughter was agitated, like she was just snapping all over the house, and I had this intuitive thing say to me, it's like, you really don't have anything on the schedule. Why don't you, beautiful day out, why don't you take her to the park? And my
Yeah.
wife, who just recently had crazy surgery on her knee,
Mm.
had some work to do and stuff, and it was kind of a hard story. I went downstairs. I said, Shan, I'm going to take her to the park. All right, Maddie, let's go. I took her to the park. I did not look at my phone the
That's
entire time.
awesome.
The only thing I did was take out some photos of her because I wanted to send a picture to mommy. We were there for an hour. It was beautiful. I just
Awesome.
watched my daughter explore and just have fun and smile. And she calmed down. She
Mm.
needed to release out, and she had such a blast. And I had such a blast. And I got to spend that time with my 3-year-old.
It's awesome.
And that hour didn't generate revenue for me, didn't generate money for my family.
Yeah.
Okay. In that moment, that hour of time didn't do anything that caused it, but it sure as heck generated it for me internally,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
sometimes more important than the stuff that you do externally.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That's
So
what
that,
I'm with you on that one. That's what all the work is for, to have access to those moments, in my mind,
right.
right?
And this
I love
pandemic,
it.
in my opinion, opens the door for companies to realize, like, I used to live in the world where it was like you couldn't work remotely.
Yeah.
All right. Like it was like, no, unacceptable. Like you had to be there. And it's like, if you weren't there, you had to make up time. And it was just all these like weird rules and not flexible. People commute hours in the day, right? The beautiful thing about this is that you can live your life and have all kinds of experiences throughout the day and still get the work done that you need to do. And it's now forced in the hands of the companies who were afraid to take that leap. They were forced to take that leap.
Yeah.
And maybe as a result, we'll see our environment have a little less electromagnetic smog out there, right? People will have a little more flexibility in their lives, right?
Absolutely.
It's there, all there for the taking, based on the force of nature saying, we're going to slap you in the face right now,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You know, and that to
Getting
me,
me into another topic I'm excited about. Maybe we could talk about another time because I
that
know
sounds
you might
good.
like it. So
Sounds good. Or maybe a clubhouse topic. I don't know. Maybe we'll dabble in
yeah,
that. I don't know.
maybe.
There's so many things happening out there in the world. There's like clubhouse. Like I was like clubhouse. I'm like, what? Like a pool house? What do you mean? What do you mean clubhouse? What's the clubhouse?
Oh, very cool. Well, listen, it's probably a good time for us to wind up because I know we're trying to be disciplined about keeping these shorter. And we both kind of brought up a lot of different external resources. And so I think it would be great for us to do the work of getting those links out there for folks if they're curious and want to investigate on their own. Any like, any other sort of parting thoughts before we say so long to folks?
You know, um, I think that a takeaway, right? I like to summarize things, kind of like what's the kind of takeaway thing
Yeah.
here. I think tying back to leadership and our roles in society, I think we need to realize that it's more holistic in nature than just the title or the lane that we're being put into. I think we need to, just like what I think is our problem with our medical and pharmaceutical industries, is that everything's so narrow minded, looking at one thing and not realizing everything's integrated. And the same thing goes for the workplace, right? You need to look at people's their entire integrative approach to their life, understanding those key fundamentals. Um, I also think that people have a misunderstanding of what they think having health is, that it's expensive,
Yeah.
and that only certain people have access to those resources. And that's not true at all. Okay. Matter of fact,
Agreed.
it won't need to impact your time, really, if you really do it right. And it's not going to really cost you all that money, because the sun
Agreed.
is free, sleep is free. For the most part, people have access to water. If you
Yeah.
don't, right? But still, like, access to water, right? And food, yeah. If you're in a position where you can afford your food, well, it's just changing the types of food that you get,
Yeah.
right? So I leave you with, make sure you take your proper meds every single
Mhm.
day. And your meds are movement, eating, drinking, and sleeping,
Yeah.
right? Those meds are going to give you much more energy, much more vitality and life than the other meds that are out there
Yeah.
that are built in
Absolutely.
a lab.
And the necessary foundation before you can do any of this other work, frankly, right? Unless you're willing to be medicated.
Yeah,
Um,
and you don't even need to go to a doctor to get this
yeah.
checked out. If you do
Yeah.
those things now, see how you are in a week and see if you have an impact in your life. If you go
Yeah.
out and get some exercise in the sun, you go drink a lot more water, drink half your body weight in water, go sleep, get to bed by like an early hour, sleep 7 hours a night, right? And
Eight
then
and a
just
half.
eat live foods, right? Try to eat live foods.
Yeah.
Do that for a week. You don't need to go to you don't need to go to the aiming clinic yet. Just go
Yeah.
do that and see how you are in a week, right? Those doctors are better once you're at a much better baseline for yourself, right? Because they're going to be able to be the specialist that solve for
Yeah.
what's holding you back from what nature can't do for you right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
And I love like Dr. Amen, he talks about this a lot that there's this whole domain of psychology and psychotherapy that and a lot of practitioners never look at the brain. They never look at the organ they treat, and that's a big difference of what he's done is they look at the organ they treat. So it's fascinating. So hopefully some of these things are helpful for folks. And I know a lot of, a lot of us, I mean, it's been a wild year and a half, and I empathize for sure. But there are lots of free things we can do that
Yeah, for
each
sure.
day, and each of those little decisions we make really really add up. Um, so I love it, and we'll work on and practice letting go, and making sure I have those moments as well. So
Our
thank
first
you.
moment, let it go.
Let it go. Awesome. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Always a pleasure.
Bye.